And the floor is yours, sir.
My name is Evan. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Evan.
It's good to be here. Colin asked me to speak. I assure you that I notified him that I spoke here 6 months ago, and he said, too bad. So don't blame me, blame him. But no, I'm stoked to be here at a nice packed house tonight. Friday night, I always love hitting the meeting right at happy hour. It's bar time, perfect time for AA meeting. Let's see. I started drinking and also smoking pot when I was about 14 years old. And up to that time, my parents weren't alcoholics, but there was definitely partying, air quotes, around. It was, in the 70s and early 80s, and, they were pretty open-minded. There was pot, and, partying was looked at as freedom, in our family. I mean, they were into the Beatles, and coming out of the 60s, I was born in 1968, and drugs and alcohol, especially drugs, were looked at as a portal to freedom, and that the squares in society were not to be trusted, and that was obvious because they told us not to party, and we did, and it was fun. So everything else they said was probably full of crap. So it was fun. I'm just saying, it was great. I grew up in Ojai, California. It was an artist community, and a lot of hippies and rednecks, and just a great mix of people. And just a beautiful place with a lot of freedom and a lot of nurturing. So I got to be about 14, and I was saying up to that time, I was just into sports, and I got good grades, and then one day I really can't explain what happened, but somebody said that jocks were lame, and I never played sports again, and at that time I started getting interested in girls and drinking and smoking and playing guitar, and all of a sudden this punk rock music came to town. There was one kid that had moved up from Hollywood, and he kind of brought some records with him, and he turned on my brother and some of the older kids, and that filtered down to me. They were probably like 16, and I was like 13, basically. So I heard this music, and feeling the way I did at the time, going through puberty, adolescence, and just feeling kind of disconnected all of a sudden from who I was and from my community and where I fit in. I don't even feel like drinking and this music scene was an escape so much as it was just so exciting. It just looked like a portal to fun and to connect with people, and it was rebellious, and it was everything my parents had kind of talked about, but it pissed them off at the same time. I mean, so it was just great, and I find, so I got into this scene, and I'm telling you, man, from the very beginning, we would buy cases of beer. I mean, I was like 14 years old, we'd shoulder tap. They had this Brown Derby beer at Safeway down there, and it was $4 a case. And if you could come up with $2, that was a freaking 12-pack, right? And I mean, 14 years old, you start drinking like a 12-pack is what you want. I'm not saying I drank a 12-pack, but, it was like, yeah, we were getting cases of beer, So we would play quarters so we could slam it down quick, and it was fun, and it was something to do, and we were doing it on the weeknights, school nights and stuff, and it was great, man. We had this music, this soundtrack playing, and it was this youth culture that was really run by the kids, and it was away from the adults, and there was bands, and they were touring the country, and there were shows in Hollywood and Santa Monica and Santa Barbara, and we would ride in the back of pickup trucks, before the seatbelt laws and all that stuff, or hitchhike or whatever, and this whole culture, this subculture had developed that was really based around alcohol, and it was fantastic because you could you know, you would drink and you would dance and you would hear this music, and it was just an all-encompassing, really felt revolutionary, fun time, you know, and it felt important, and it felt like we were on the cusp of something, you know. It really felt revolutionary at the time, and I think that it's had broad influence over our culture in general, you know. But the interesting thing, and why I kind of bring it up tonight, is because, you know, in my spirituality today, I really am into this idea that there's, you know, that there's not these set ideas, you know. Everything seems to have a plurality or a duality to it, you know. And I think that the punk rock scene and the drinking and that stuff really fits right into that world, that, you know, that sense world, dualistic. You know, I heard somebody say something today about it's like, you know, the morals of what was going on were really depend on who you talk to. You know what I mean? Like everybody had an opinion about it, and that was encouraged to have your own opinion. And I assure you that these were the values that attracted me to AA when I got here, you know. And not to jump ahead in the story, but so within this subculture was this idea, one, that we were revolutionary, that we were free thinkers, that we had found freedom, and that there was a sense of responsibility in this because we were putting on our own shows and starting our own bands and not just taking what was force-fed to society, you know. And I love that sense, you know. And I think that it goes right along with, you know, even ideals of early Christianity and Buddhism and these ideas that, you know, I know now about this middle path. That's a, you know, and what does that mean? Well, I feel like that middle path is the path between, you know, the positivity and the creativity of something and the negativity of it, you know, and walking that fine line, you know. So even though I didn't know it at the time, I was already started on a spiritual path. So because, as I said, you know, there was freedom, there was camaraderie, there was expression, creativity within here, but there was also self-destruction, drugs and alcohol, violence. And at any given time, any of those so-called negative things were considered positives. Really, I mean, go out and get in a fight and get effed up and puke and, you know, and hurt yourself. I mean, these were all things that were also attractive to me. So it's interesting to me to be able to see that where I came out of and what alcohol represented to me. So the reason why, you know, part of why I bring that up, so what does that mean? Is there no morality in life? Is everything just good, bad? Perhaps. You know, I think that was a big philosophy of the Oxford group that was the sort of the seed of AA, was this idea that there really wasn't any intrinsic sin in the world. I mean, that it was all basically situational. And again, to get back to the middle path, is this idea that it's up to me as an individual to find what it means at the time, what is good, what is evil, based on the circumstances, to be able to judge that in the present time. So, an example, I mean, I could tell somebody, I love you. Well, that's got to be good, right? Well, what if I don't love them? Now I'm being dishonest. You can really hurt somebody by saying, I love you. That's insane, right? I mean, I'll be the first one to come up here and say that love is the answer, because I know that it is in my heart, and I'll get to that. But the truth is that therein lies the duality, the plurality of experience. And to find that balance is to find that middle way. So this is where I came out of. So what happened? Well, why didn't I just become this spiritual person? Well, in a sense I was, getting back to the duality thing, but I was suffering, and I was in pain, and I never learned to deal with anger. You know, I never was taught that, and I never learned how to deal with sexuality, because all I ever knew was get drunk and have sex, and that was considered intimacy for me. You know what I mean? And you know, 20, 30 years later, I'm in a marriage of 13 years, and what do I really know about intimacy? I know how to get drunk and how to have sex. that's all I really know. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not trying to get way off topic here, but this certainly is a huge part of my alcoholism. I mean, I'm at the point right now where I'm just trying to explain my disease, right? And this is what it was. I drank to have sex. I mean, let's be honest, right? I don't know, nobody's smiling, but I think that's pretty much why we did it, right? Come on, people. Let's be honest here, right? You know, the only true aphrodisiac, a six-pack and backseat of a, whatever that thing is. I heard that somewhere. So that was, so again, this is what attracted me. It was a good thing. It allowed me to have sex, when I was I mean, obviously it was awkward and difficult. I was 14 years old. It should be difficult and awkward at that point, right? Yet I wanted to grow up so bad. I wanted to be an adult so bad. And this was the sense of my alcoholism, that as I said, it wasn't necessarily an escape away from things. It was a doorway into things. And it was a security blanket so that I could, so that nobody, you know, and then, so where was my disease? My disease was in people telling me not to do it or trying to control me so I couldn't do it, right? Because I hadn't gone over the edge yet, so I still considered myself free. Well, what happened? Well, I'm an alcoholic. So what happened was that I crossed this line, this invisible line. I'm not going to say imaginary because it was absolutely real. Eventually, I crossed the line into, you know, liquor ceased to be a luxury and became a necessity, you know. Eventually, you know, as it says in the big book, this thing boomeranged, and I love that analogy. And it boomeranged in its flight, and it nearly cut me to ribbons, is the way Bill Wilson says it. And I love that analogy because this thing started out as something good. How does something good become shit, right? Isn't that the story of alcoholism? Something starts out good. It was magical. And then somehow it transforms, or I transform, and all of a sudden it's shit. And it's going to kill me. And it's making me miserable. Ching, ching. Here's where alcoholism comes in. And yet I can't stop doing it. Okay? So enjoying it, even getting the repercussions of it, none of that makes me an alcoholic. The part that makes me an alcoholic, because that could happen to anybody, right? I think it's exacerbated, exaggerated, amplified with alcoholics, but certainly any hard drinker could go through a similar thing. The difference is that when it became a problem, I couldn't, and I wanted to stop it, I couldn't stop. Which got me to my bottom. And I got sober. And I'm not going to get into all the details of that. I'd rather focus on what happened, which was that I came to AA. So here's this guy that wanted to be free, that had found a solution in rebellion, in free thinking, in humanism, and yet had become enslaved by the very thing that had freed me. So I came to AA, not, yay! Not even really like, hey, fuck you. I really came here just defeated. Just defeated. And I think that's the only way I really could have come. You know, I'm not going to get into everything that got me here, but that's just served to say that's where I was when I got here. So what happened? I showed up, and you know, and I think I had a lot of preconceptions about maybe what this thing was about, that it was about, you know, getting good or getting religious, becoming a square, turning off everything, you know, that I used to, you know, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I was beat up. I was done. I didn't want to be a cool guy anymore when I got here. I really didn't. I didn't go hang out with the cool kids with the tattoos and skateboarding and all the stuff that I was into. I went into a rehab, and I just gravitated to the middle-aged men that seemed to have a solution, you know, that were working the steps and doing service. And that's what was attractive to me. But the context of that for me was that I got here, and while, I might not have been like this, I was certainly like this, that I was hesitant and afraid of what was going to happen here. And a miracle happened, that I got here, and it was totally punk rock. From the first day I got here, I was like, holy shit, these are my people, and it wasn't, oh, go ahead.
I think your kid.
No, not my kid. Somebody?
Some kids do stuff, I guess.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody with a kid?
Not your kid.
He's at home.
You were saying, Evan.
I was saying that I got here and it was totally punk rock, and again, getting back to this idea of what I said, and not in the necessarily self-destructive or drug-addled or Sid Vicious, overdose and die, Darby Crash way, although there was plenty of that, don't get me wrong, but in the sense of community-based, democratic, egalitarian, DIY, do-it-yourself. Nobody's going to get you sober. You got to participate in this thing. One of the beautiful things about punk rock was that there was no delineation between the audience and the performers. That was one of the really, truly revolutionary things about punk rock. That when you went to a punk rock show and you saw a band you liked, you jumped right up on stage with them. And that was considered okay. Now, bouncers at some point got hip to this and might try to throw you off, but that was part of the show. And you'd get up there and you'd do your little dance and you'd dive off the stage and people were stoked. So when I got here, boom, there it was. No delineation. The audience is the speaker is the audience. There's no hierarchy here. There's no, degrees or certification that needs to happen. You're a member when you say you are. And you get out of this thing what you put into it. And everybody's story matters. And everybody here is a healer. And in fact, this thing only works when we all participate. When we participate. That's how this thing works. And the very solution to this disease is one, in helping other alcoholics to get sober, not doctors and psychiatrists helping alcoholics get sober. It's alcoholics helping alcoholics get sober. And even that's got this plurality, this duality to it, because the other side of it is not only do the alcoholics get the alcoholics sober, but it's through that process of the alcoholics helping the alcoholics that the alcoholic actually stays sober. So it's not just you come in here and heal me, alcoholics, heal me, although there's plenty of that happens. But I feel for myself that the real transformation, the real spiritual awakening, the real recovery happened when I took it upon myself to help out other alcoholics get sober. When I understood that my sobriety meant something, that every day I'm sober, I just, as everybody here, I get to lead through example and get to be living proof of a miracle, and nothing short of that. So thank God for that. So where does that get me? It gets me to sober, and then I got to start doing these, and then I start doing these steps to have the spiritual awakening that they talk about in the 12th step. There's a process that goes along with this. So, through this process, there's a lot of truth. There's a lot of self-analysis and self-awareness that needs to start happening. We do this inventory, and we make amends. We clean these channels so that we can find a higher power. And this idea of higher power was totally DIY as well. That it was really emphasized in here that every time it says God, it says of your own understanding, which to me is not a cop-out. I don't think that's even a soft soap deal. What I see in that is that we need to actually practice spirituality, that I need to actually come to grips with this thing, to engage with it. I need to understand what it is that I'm talking about. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to write some long philosophy about what God is. In fact, it's pretty explicit in the book that it really doesn't matter what you think about God. In fact, it probably shouldn't even be discussed. That's a matter, it's, what does it say? That's a matter for each individual to figure out for themselves. I'm paraphrasing, but not very much. It's almost exactly what it says. That this is a matter for each individual to figure out for themselves. And how do I do that? Well, for me, the way that I did that, the way I did it for myself, the way I developed an understanding of what God is, was by doing the steps, was by doing the self-reflection, was by doing the inventory, and by making the amends. And through those experiences, that became the basis of what God was for me. That God became forgiveness. That God became compassion. That God became love and helping other people and clarity. And that was all very organic. Again, this wasn't an intellectual exercise. It was through this experience of literally going to people and saying I'm sorry, or going to somebody and saying I'm going to pay you back, And before that, writing down what I'd done to people and what they'd done to me. And so getting through that process developed this consciousness of a higher power. Which was built, individually, well, within the group, but for myself. So then we get to this idea of step 11, which, is again completely multifaceted. Can probably mean something different to every single person in the room, and I love that. That's so punk rock. You know what? Doesn't matter what you think. It's necessary for me to come up with what I think, So, yet there's some very basic instructions in the step itself, which I think often don't get discussed, which is just simply this idea of praying for the knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out. Now, what the heck is that? Seriously. I mean, if we all go around saying we know what God's will is, they're probably going to lock us up. Right? It even says in the book, this thing, it's like, this idea that we're not going to be inspired at all times. Having just made, it's probable, we might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. So, pretty iffy, like kind of strange, yet I'm sure we can come up with some ideas. But the reason why I bring this up is because this is an idea that I've been sort of wrestling with lately, and it's kind of where I'm at. I'm not one to really think of God as a he or a she or an it. Honestly, I'm not really one to think of God as being an entity that would have a will. Right? Praying for God's will. Well, wait a second. That's saying, again, in this world of duality and plurality where, depending on who you ask, everybody's got a different opinion of what God's will is, right? I don't want to be, overly offensive, but certainly the people that crashed a plane into the World Trade Center thought that was God's will. And I know that myself do not share that belief, okay? But I'm just saying it's pretty up for interpretation. And I also think that, using the horrible example of 9/11, the idea that a lot of times when people really feel that they know what God's will is, things like 9/11 happen. That's scary, right? Tell me what your will is and the power to carry that out. Jiminy Cricket, that's probably exactly what those guys did before they did that. That's horrifying, right? This is the world we live in. This is the sense world. This is Mara. This is where we're at. Scary stuff, right? I mean, you see the manifestations of what humanity is, the ego, the self, the fear. Just look out there, man. I mean, it's there. And yet, we behold the ocean. We behold the beautiful things that we build and the community that we build. So, where am I going with this? At the end of every meeting, we say the Lord's Prayer, right? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Giving praise to you. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Well, here we are, praying for God's will to be done. What the heck is God's will, right? I love it, though, because what it establishes is a relationship. And there's a million interpretations, but here's one where God is a father, meaning the son of the Father, the same way we get our last names, that we're part of this family, that we're of this thing. Whatever it is, we can use the analogy of a family. That's fine, but we know that we're of this thing, which makes us part of it, right? And glory be unto it. That means the death of self, right? Suicidal tendencies, one of my favorite punk bands, right? I want to kill the self in order to become unified with the all. So I'm a part of this thing. I have a relationship with it. I've been born of it. I'm made of it, And the glory be unto it, and not unto me, not under my selfishness. And
Hello.
Well, this is getting weird.
Much. I love you.
Have a seat, brother. Thank you. So anyways, I think what it's saying with with His kingdom come is that this comes to all of us. We either all die, or maybe we all come to God, and that God's will is done. So to me, God's will, no, I'll shorten this up, I know I'm running out of time. To me, God's will is just whatever happens, right? It's just whatever is. So to me, to pray for God's will is just to pray for acceptance, ultimately, right? There really isn't something that I have to do to make God's will happen. It's more a matter of my relationship to it and my perception of it. So if I can let it go and be in acceptance of it, then that's really what I need to do to become no self. And then above and beyond, but wait, we're going to have to take some action, right? Well, therein lies, again, this plurality. This is the middle path. What do I accept? And what actions do I take? I can't just sit there and do nothing, right? So I'm going to have to take some actions. And this, again, bringing me back to the whole punk rock thing, where do I sit in this world? I'm going to have to look inside myself, and I'm going to have to make a decision. And what is our third step? Whenever we talk about the third step, it's always turning my will over, acceptance, this idea of becoming the hole in the donut, right? But it's really not the essence of it as far as I'm concerned. The essence of the third step is in cognitive action. It's in making a decision. It's in using our will. It's in using our intellect. So therein lies my recovery. That I just have to make the decision when to be accepting and how to take action. And I need a lot of help to do that. And I pray for guidance, as it says to do. And I think I'll just kind of end with this, because as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves, that we're no longer running the show. This is me doing God's will. Just reminding myself that I'm not running the show. Saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. Well, I already discussed what I think that means. It means everything. We're then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. So I really feel like that's my message for tonight, you know, is just to find that place of between acceptance and action. Not so easy, but this is my lot, you know, and when it comes down to it, and this is the last thing, at some point we do have to make a decision, and this is where again what I'm trying to articulate is that so much of this is just in the way we want to look at things, you know, is in turning to the good. I mean, if we realize that really God's will is everything good and bad, then it's up to me to try to nurture the good, because that's what brings me joy. It's up to me to try to get it to stop watering the seeds of anger in my response to things and start nurturing compassionate response to people, places, and things. So hopefully I haven't put you guys to sleep. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.